Hello friends. In the previous video, I showed how to deploy N8N and our own database service with Coolify. Now, I will show how to access databases, files, or directories between different projects on the same server. For now, I will only demonstrate how we can access the database on N8N. We can touch upon topics like directory operations later. However, since they are more advanced for now, I will only show how to access the database. By the way, you don't have to use Supabase only with N8N. It is a separate database service on its own. You can use it as you wish. We install it as a separate service so that it is an independent service on its own. Now we come to the N8N interface. Let's create a sample workflow here. Let's add a manual trigger here. For example, normally there are native Supabase nodes within N8N. However, these nodes are incomplete and not fully functional. For this reason, I use Postgres nodes. When we write Postgres, let's pull an example row of data from our database. I mentioned that the Supabase nodes are incomplete, but if their functions are sufficient for you, of course, you can use them. However, since there's no option to execute SQL code directly in these nodes, I prefer Postgres. Postgres has the Execute SQL Query option. We use Postgres because we can execute our own custom SQL codes from here. Also, since Supabase's own database is Postgres, we can use these nodes effectively. Under normal circumstances, there are other database nodes available in N8N, but they do not work compatibly with Supabase. Now, when we come here, we need to add a database. In other words, we need to add database credentials. Normally, it shows localhost here, but we won't be able to connect via localhost. First, we come to the Coolify panel. We enter into Supabase. Let's enter the container service. Here, there's PostgreSQL. The username and database name are Postgres. We come to our workflow. The user and database fields remain as Postgres. We take our password from Coolify. We copy our Postgres password and paste it into the password field. Normally, when we save it this way, we get an error because it cannot connect via localhost. So how will we do this? We come to Coolify. Normally our service name here is Supabase, but what we need is not the general service of Supabase, but the database service. If we haven't made any changes, we copy the default service name. We add the DB parameter to it, so it becomes Supabase DB-parameter. We make the connection this way. However, when we save and test it, we will get an error again because the containers cannot see each other as localhost. They are not connected on the same network. How will we solve this? First, we move to our server. Let's list our networks. Then let's list our services. Here, there's Supabase service. It shows Postgres. We need to connect this into the N8N container, that is, to the same network as N8N. It may sound a bit confusing if you're unfamiliar with the terms. For this, I prepared a prompt. We copy its English version and paste it into any ChatGPT or another LLM model. Here, we write which services we want to connect. For example, it's enough to write Supabase DB on the other side. We also add the network and service lists we obtained from our server. GPT finds the name and network information of the N8N container for us. It also detects Supabase DB. Now we need to connect these two to each other. We take the command given by GPT and run it on the server. It doesn't give an error. return to the workflow, we click Retry Again. As you can see, it's connected. We save and close it. Here, for example, we cannot select a table because we do not have any tables yet. Let's create a new table. Let's add a table named Test. Let's add a new column. Let's enter data directly through N8N. As you can see, it fetched our table. The table we created named Test has come. Let's open the automatic column setting. Let's delete the ID field and let it generate automatically. Let's write Hello Mars in the text section. Let's say Execute Step. It successfully provided output. When we refreshed, our data came Hello Mars. Now our connection between networks is ready. However, this solution is temporary. The reason it is temporary is that network connections are lost when the container is recreated. So currently there is a flow that works quite well. But when we stop the N8N service from the projects and redeploy on Coolify, the connection breaks. When N8N containers are brought back up, the service stabilizes. When we test again, the SQL connection errors out. It says it can't reach the host we wrote in the host section. When we check the credentials section, it shows that it can't connect to localhost. Even though all our information is correct, it cannot establish the connection because, as I mentioned, network connections are lost when containers are restarted. If you're using a container only for testing purposes, or a stable one that never shuts down, this temporary method might suffice. But if you have containers that are regularly updated or restarted, we need to configure network settings in Coolify. Thus, the connections will be preserved even when the container is restarted. As you can see, the connection is lost. When we enter the SSH panel and rerun the same code, the database reconnects. When we test, it is possible to input data into the database again. In this video, I showed the temporary connection. In the next video, I will show how to make the connections permanent even if the containers are restarted. Thank you for watching.